Hi, welcome to the ANZ Amplify Days workshop. My name's Ross McKillop. I'm an AWS Solutions Architect, and today I'm just going to walk you through kind of the first few steps in this workshop. I'll show you how to set your application up, how to connect it with Amplify, how to get some of your resources spun up in the cloud, and then I'll be available later on Twitch to answer any questions that you might have. So the application that we're going to build today is a pretty simple photo sharing app. It's a web application made with React. We're going to use the Create React App framework to create that scaffolding for the application, and then we're going to connect it in with Amplify using the Amplify command line interface. We'll add a few different features using Amplify. So we're going to add a GraphQL API with AppSync, some storage so that we can persist photos and other user settings. And then we can also add authentication authorization using Cognito. So I'm going to actually walk you through how to get this all set up to begin with, and then I'll leave you to your own devices to build the rest of the application out. So the first thing that we're going to do is use the Create React App framework to build out our basic React web application, and then after that we'll hook Amplify in. So let's take that first step. So I'm going to run this first command, this npx create react app postogram. So postogram is going to be the name of our application. So I'm just going to switch over to Visual Studio Code, and I'm going to copy this command, and I'm going to run it, and that'll scaffold our web application. So if I just run this command in here, you'll see a couple of things kind of spin past as the basic framework for your web application gets created. It's going to download a whole bunch of NPM modules, so this might take a little while. I'm going to pause the video for a minute and we'll come back when that's finished on my side. Okay, so that took around about 4 minutes on my machine. Hopefully it doesn't take quite as long on yours. But if we take a look, we can see what Create React App did. It essentially downloaded a whole bunch of modules, installed them all. There's a lot of packages that get installed, and then it sort of sets up your directory structure for your web application and gives you a few instructions on how to actually run your app. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to change into that directory that we've just created, and we're going to install a couple of extra node modules. So they're listed there on the instructions just to the side of my picture here. So you can just copy those and paste them into the terminal, which is what I'm going to do as well. So this is going to install the Amplify modules that you can use to interact with the Amplify SDK within your app, and a couple of other things that we're going to use. And again, this is going to take a couple of minutes, so I'm just going to pause the video here and we'll come back when this is done. Okay, so again, that took a couple of minutes on my machine. Hopefully yours will be a little faster. The next thing that we need to do is to install the Amplify command line if you haven't already done that. And the instructions for that are here on this page. There's actually a video that you can watch if you'd like a little more instruction, but it's very straightforward. So all you need to do is run this npm install AWS Amplify command up here, and that'll take a couple of minutes. You'll get it all installed. And then the important thing you need to do after that is to actually run through this Amplify configure section. And what this does is this sets up the Amplify CLI tools on your laptop to be connected to your AWS account. So you're going to give it the credentials for a new IAM user that you're going to create. And again, that's all explained in this extra video that's linked up here. So go ahead and go through that process. And then you can come back, and once you have Amplified installed, then we can actually take the React app that we've just created and hook it up with Amplify using this Amplify init command that's down here at the bottom under initializing a new project. So I'm going to do that right now with the project that we've just created, the Postogram project. So I'm going to switch back over to VS Code and show you how to do that. So the command that you run here is very straightforward. It's just amplify init, make sure you're in the Postogram directory. This is then going to just walk you through a couple of kind of guided questions about how you want to create your application. Most of these we're going to just use the defaults. So the first one here, for example, enter a name for your project. We're just going to select the default there. Enter a name for the environment. We're going to go with dev. Choose your default editor. So there's a lot of supported ones there. I'm using Visual Studio Code, so we're going to select that. The next few settings are all around the type of application that you're building. So we're using React, so we're building a JavaScript application in React. Again, we can use the defaults here because it knows about the directory structure for a React application. So we can use source and build. These are the npm commands to run. And this is just about it. So the last couple of things that it'll do, this takes a moment, is it's going to ask whether I want to use an AWS profile for credentials for this or not. And that basically would mean that you would need to add the credentials later. We are going to choose yes when this actually comes back. Okay, there it is. So yes, I do want to use a profile. I have quite a number of these set up, so I'm going to use this one. And now this is going to run for a minute or so. It's going to, again, do a little bit of scaffolding and connecting. It's going to create all of the resources that we need in our AWS account to actually run an Amplify application. So after you run that command, you'll see a bunch of different CloudFormation outputs come by, and you'll see, it's creating some roles in there, an S3 bucket, a couple of other things. And then when it gets to the end and it's finished creating all of those resources, it gives you a couple of example commands that you can run. Amplify status shows you any of the resources that you've configured. So if you add an API or authentication or storage, it'll show you the state of those. Right now, if I run that command, it won't show us anything useful. If I run the Amplify console command, however, it will actually, it'll launch a browser window and take me to my AWS account and show me my, my current Amplify application. And I'll show you what that looks like. So if I run that Amplify console command, and then it pops open a browser window, it looks like this. So what that's showing me is basically the resources that it's currently created. If I click through these other tabs like authentication, API, file storage, you'll note that they're all empty at the moment, right? And so we haven't actually added any extra resources to our project. It just kind of exists as an empty shell at the moment. So the next thing that we'll do is actually get started on adding a GraphQL API and AppSync. So this will allow us to create a new post with our Postogram application. So upload a photo, maybe give some detail about the post, and this will persist that post for us. So I'll walk you through how to do that, and then I'll leave you to your own devices to follow through the other sections. So we're going to use the Amplify CLI again in order to add this GraphQL component. So this is what the command looks like here. We're just going to do Amplify add API. And then again, it'll walk us through the different options that we have available to us, just kind of using a Q&A type process. So I'm going to switch back over to VS Code and show you what that looks like. So I just run the command Amplify add API. Now, we're going to add a GraphQL API, not a REST API. So if we were to add a REST API, I'd use API Gateway. GraphQL, we're going to use AppSync. And my computer is running a little bit slowly because of all this recording software that I've got going, so please bear with me. We're just going to use the default here for the API name. This is based on our project. we're going to use an API key for authentication, and we're going to just say this is a public API key. I'm going to leave this at 7 days. I'll probably have all of this deleted before you even see it, so 7 days is going to be more than enough. Do you want to configure advanced settings for the GraphQL API? Right now, we're just going to choose no. Do you have an annotated GraphQL schema? So this is asking, have you already written your schema out yourself, or do you want to generate one? So we're going to go with no, which is the default. And do you want guided schema creation? Yes, we do. So this is a really neat feature of Amplify. This will actually kind of build us a little schema that we can use as kind of a starting point. Now the application that we're going to build is kind of similar to a to-do application if you think about it, right? We're going to create a post that just has a little bit of detail and some content that we want to persist. If we were building a to-do app or a photo posting app, they're very similar in kind of the data that we want to create. So we can just use this single object with fields kind of boilerplate, and that's a really good starting point. So we're going to say yes, we do want to edit that now, and that'll actually pop open the editor that we specified earlier. And so that's just loaded up this default schema.graphql file in VS Code for me. So what we're going to do is we're going to switch back over to the workshop. We're going to copy this this section out of the bottom here and actually take this this schema definition and paste it into VS Code. So I'm going to copy that, switch back over to VS Code, and then paste that in here, save it, and then go back to my terminal and hit enter. And so that's basically it for adding the API. What this is going to do now is figure out, it's going to basically build some CloudFormation to create the API that we've defined in our AWS account. And then once we push that, it'll actually create all of those resources for us in our AWS account. So it's, as you can see here from the output, it's compiled that schema, it's created all of the CloudFormation that it needs to. So, and it's detailed that we can either run Amplify push or publish. Push will build everything in the back end and actually push it up to AWS. So create all of those resources that we've defined in our AWS account. And so that's what I'm going to do now. I'm just going to run Amplify push. And this will take a couple of minutes because it's going to execute that CloudFormation on my AWS account. Now it takes a second to kind of analyze your AWS account and figure out what is the delta that it needs to make. And then it comes back with this prompt saying, are you sure that this is what you want to do? So do we want to deploy some CloudFormation under the API category? So yes, we do. We're going to hit Y in here. And this is going to ask us a couple more questions. As you can see, let me just switch back over to the workshop. Basically, just follow the kind of details that we have in here. Just choose the same answers that you have listed in there, and I'll show you what that looks like. So, do you want to generate code for your newly created GraphQL API? Yes, we do. JavaScript makes sense. It understands the file patterns that you would expect in a React application, so we're just going to go with the defaults here. Do you want to generate or update all possible GraphQL operations? So in here, if we choose no, we could specify, okay, I only want queries or I only want subscriptions to prevent, say, being able to use a mutation to be able to create or update. But we want everything, so we're just going to go with yes. Maximum statement depth. We're going to keep that at 2. And now this is going to kick off actually updating everything in our AWS account. So I'm going to pause there again. While that's running, let me just switch back over to the workshop for a minute, and let me point out something in here. So if you're just willing to go with all of the defaults on your Amplify push command, you can run this this command here in the green section that says amplify push-y. This is a real time saver if you don't want to go through that process every time you're pushing new resources to answer all of those questions. Over in the background, my VS Code is still running that CloudFormation, so it's going to take a little while. Okay, so that took about 4 minutes on my laptop, and you can see if you scroll back through the output from that command that it run a whole bunch of CloudFormation to create all of the things that we needed in our AWS account. And then at the end it spits out a couple of useful outputs, right? So there's an API key for our GraphQL API. There's actually a GraphQL endpoint URL that we could hit if we wanted to run queries or mutations against it. But a good way of testing this out is actually to go back to the console, and we can actually kind of interact with the GraphQL API from there. So I'm going to show you what I'll do. I'm going to run these commands here. I'm going to run Amplify Console API, which will launch my AWS account and take us into the console for the GraphQL API. And then I can actually take this code, this mutation that's listed out here, and the query below it, and interact directly with the API. So I can create a post, and then I can query for that post afterwards. So we'll do that right now. Let me switch back over to VS Code, and we're going to run Amplify Console. And then if we just run Amplify Console, it'll just take us to the project, but we can actually specify that we want to go directly into the API section. So we're going to choose GraphQL because we could have multiple APIs configured for our Amplify project. And then that's going to pop up a browser window. So let me just switch over to that. Okay, so here's my Amplify console. And in here, I could paste the code for that mutation and the query that we have listed in the workshop. So I'm just going to switch back over there, copy that, and paste it in. And if I run this, it's actually going to hit my API, and you can see the response there that I got back. So it's actually created that that post for me in my DynamoDB. So now I'm going to grab the query, and we can run that as well. And what this should do is show me the post that I just created, and there it is. So you can do that with your own account. And then the last thing that we're going to do in this section is actually take the code that has been generated based on that schema and embed it into our React application. So I'll walk you through that as well. So there's a couple of important things to note in this next section, and that's sort of how our React application actually connects into Amplify, and how we can make API calls and interact with our resources from our React application. So this AWS-exports.js file, which is under your source directory, is worth taking a look at. It has some configuration around the GraphQL API endpoint, the API key, and a couple of other things that your application needs in order to connect to your account. And that file is automatically generated, so don't edit it, because when you add new resources, it'll get recreated with all of the configuration for those new services that you've added. So those 3 lines of code just here are important, because that's how we tell our React application where the configuration is and to incorporate that into our app. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to take this code and we're going to drop it into our index.js in the bottom of our import section. So I'm just going to quickly switch over to VS Code and do that right now. So that's just going to go right here. I'll save my file. And then the other thing that we're going to do is we're going to modify our app.js file. So this line of code that's called out just here, this is how we make an API call in React to our GraphQL endpoint. It's a really simple single line of code. That query list posts is defined in a JavaScript file that was automatically generated based on our GraphQL schema. So we get a lot of things for free using React and using the Amplify framework. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the entire contents of this section here with the app.js code, and I'm going to drop that into my app.js, and then we can actually run the application and see what it looks like. So I'm just going to switch over to VS Code. I'm going to replace everything that's in this file with what's in the workshop there and save that. And then let me just switch back to the workshop so you can see what I'm doing. And then all the way down the bottom here is this command npm start. So that's basically going to run a web server locally on your machine and pop open a browser where you can see the application in action. So let me just switch back to VS Code again. Run npm start. Now this is going to take a moment on my machine again, and I'll pop up the window that we have and show you what that looks like in a second. Okay, so that took an inordinately long amount of time on my laptop to start. I hope yours is much faster. Over here in VS Code, you can see this little section here is what we're actually rendering in our application. So you can tell right off the bat that it's not going to be super exciting. It just says hello world. And it's running that list posts query, and all of the data that it's coming back from that call is going to list out in here. So it's doing posts.map, which basically says take every single one of those posts and do this with it. So it's just creating a simple div with a post ID as its key, so you won't see that, and a h3 heading with the post name, and a little paragraph section with the post location. So when we do actually launch that, it looks like this. Very, very basic application, but it has the title of my post and the location. And that's from that mutation that I ran in the console earlier. So now that you've got your application spun up and you've got an API added into it, and you should have all of this kind of scaffolding in place to be able to kind of do this whole Amplify workflow from end to end, why don't you go ahead and follow through the next sections on the workshop and join us on Twitch if you've got any questions. I'll be on there for the next hour or so answering any questions that you might have. So I hope you enjoy the workshop, and I hope you learn a lot about Amplify.